The morning began with the sound of steel grinding against steel, a mechanical heartbeat pulsing through the industrial veins of South Chicago as forklifts whined and conveyor belts clattered like restless thunder. Monique Daniels pulled her hood tighter against the cold air that seeped through the warehouse walls while she clocked in at 5:43 a.m., fingers numb and spirit tired, her name flickering across the digital screen as though even the system hesitated to record another day of her life spent here. She had been 25 when she started, still believing this job would be a bridge to something better, a temporary grind before nursing school, before life became small and narrow and scheduled by quotas. Now, at 29, she moved like someone whose body remembered the rhythm of exhaustion better than rest. "Another sunrise in paradise," Jamal said beside her, stretching his long arms as he fitted his gloves, the fluorescent lights carving shadows under his cheekbones. If paradise had broken AC and screaming supervisors. Monique smirked. Don't forget the free back pain. Around them, the warehouse breathed. Crates stacked to the ceiling, belts humming, the smell of cardboard and sweat and the faint sweetness of plastic wrap. Above their heads hung cameras, blinking red, silent witnesses that cared only about productivity. Mr. Crane, the floor manager, strode past with his clipboard like a warden, calling out, "Let's tighten those rates today. People, corporate's watching metrics." Metrics, Monique thought bitterly. Not people, not dreams, just numbers on a screen somewhere in an office high above the noise. She bent, lifted, scanned, lifted again until her shoulders screamed and her palms burned, until time blurred into the rhythm of machines. By 10, sweat slicked her back, and a young temp collapsed on a crate nearby, whispering that her wrist had locked up. "Clock out," Crane barked without looking. "We can't afford injuries today." Monique felt something twist inside her chest, a small knot of anger tightening. When lunch finally came, she and Jamal sat on an overturned pallet behind aisle 9, eating sandwiches wrapped in foil. "You hear about that girl up in Jersey?" he asked. "Dropped dead on the floor last week. Heart failure. She was 27. Monique swallowed hard. "They stopped the line?" "Maintenance cleaned the spot and kept moving," he said. They both stared at the floor, the hum of machinery filling the space where outrage should have been. That night, in her one-bedroom apartment overlooking the cracked pavement of 81st Street, Monique played her mother's voicemail again. "Baby, you're working yourself into the grave. God didn't put you here to break for strangers." She turned off the phone and stared at the ceiling fan spinning above her bed like the warehouse belts that haunted her sleep. Bills waited on the counter, rent due in 3 days. She opened her laptop and read an article that had been trending online. Warehouse workers nationwide speak out against unsafe conditions. Dozens of faces, Black, Latino, white, tired but determined, demanding dignity. Something inside her stirred like an ember catching wind. The next day, whispers began between shifts, soft enough to drown beneath the noise of sorting belts. "You read that article?" she asked Lena, a mother of 2 with hands like leather and eyes that carried quiet storms. Lena nodded carefully. "My cousin works in Philly. Said they're starting worker committees, secret ones. Folks are tired, Mo. Tired of breaking their bodies for pennies." Monique looked up at the blinking cameras. "You think we could do that here?" "Not if they see us talking," Lena said. "But maybe it's time." Later that night, they met at a laundromat 2 blocks away, pretending to fold clothes while the dryer spun like the ticking of a clock they no longer wanted to obey. Jamal leaned against the counter, voice low. "We could start with OSHA. Report the equipment, the hours." "They'll trace it back," Monique said. "Crane's got eyes everywhere." Lena tore a napkin from the dispenser, scribbling words in blue ink. "We don't start with a fight. We start with a voice." They stared at the napkin as though it might be a map. The following week the warehouse seemed different, charged. People started clocking out together instead of alone. Notes slipped inside lunch bags. Monique noticed Crane pacing more, barking faster, the veins in his neck standing out like ropes. Corporate posters appeared overnight. "We value your wellness," as if printed empathy could erase fatigue. Late one evening, Monique saw Crane berating a middle-aged woman whose scanner had jammed. "You slowing down the line again? You're killing our numbers." The woman's wrist was swollen, her face wet with tears. "I just need a minute." "Clock out and go home," Crane snapped. "You're a liability." Liability. The word hit Monique like a slap. She stepped forward before her fear could stop her. She needs medical help, not humiliation. Crane turned, eyes cold. "You want to join her?" Around them the line slowed, then stopped. The only sound was Monique's heart hammering in her ears. "Maybe you should think about what happens when all of us walk out," she said quietly. Gasps spread through the aisles. Crane's face reddened. "You people forget there's a line of folks waiting to replace you." "Then maybe they'll walk too," she said. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the injured woman started clapping, slow, shaky. Another joined. The sound grew until it filled the air with defiance. Monique felt dizzy, terrified, alive. That night, she sat by her window, the city glowing below, her hands trembling. She knew she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The next morning, management called a meeting, promising open dialogue and team engagement. The cameras still rolled. Quotas stayed the same. "They're scared," Jamal muttered. "That's why they're pretending to care." Monique nodded. "Then maybe it's working." The whispers became plans. Plans became resolve. One dawn, under the flicker of warehouse lights, it happened. It began with silence. Lena set down her scanner first. Then Jamal. Then the guy from aisle 12 who'd never missed a shift in 8 years. Monique froze, then slowly placed her own box on the floor. The conveyor belts rolled for another few seconds, then stuttered and stopped. The air turned thick and holy. Crane stormed out of his office, clipboard in hand. "What the hell is going on?" No one answered. 50 workers stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes forward, breathing as one. "Get back to work," he shouted. Monique stepped forward, her voice shaking but steady. "Not until someone listens. We lift your profits every day. We bleed for this place. We deserve to be safe. We deserve to be seen." The words rippled like electricity. Someone yelled, "Say it again." "We deserve to be seen," she cried louder this time. The warehouse erupted, not chaos but chorus, hundreds of voices layered like thunder. "We are not machines. We are not replaceable." Security arrived, confused. Corporate supervisors rushed in with walkie-talkies. Cameras flashed. The chant rolled on. "We are not machines. We are not replaceable." Outside, the noise reached the street. Drivers pulled over to film. A reporter showed up, microphone trembling in the cold. "Who started this?" she asked through the fence. Lena looked at Monique and smiled. "Doesn't matter who. What matters is it started." That night, footage of the protest flooded social media. Warehouse workers halt operations nationwide. Packright's stock dropped 12% overnight. Corporate released a statement about valuing employee voices, but everyone knew it was fear speaking. Monique watched the news from her couch, her phone buzzing with messages from strangers thanking her, from workers in other states saying, "We saw you. We're doing it too." For the first time, she believed in the sound of her own courage. Yet fear lingered. Days later, she was called into Crane's office. 2 men in suits waited beside him. "Monique Daniels," one said, "we appreciate your passion, but your recent behavior constitutes a breach of conduct. Effective immediately. Your employment is terminated." Crane avoided her eyes. Monique nodded slowly, as though she had already rehearsed this moment in her dreams. "You can take the job," she said softly, "but you can't take what started." She walked out into the gray afternoon, the wind off Lake Michigan sharp against her cheeks. Jamal and Lena waited in the parking lot. "You good?" Jamal asked. "I will be," she said. "They think it ends with me. It doesn't." Monique walked down the long stretch of cracked pavement outside the warehouse with her badge still hanging from her hoodie, its plastic edges catching the wind like a discarded memory. As she reached the corner, a truck driver leaned out of his cab and gave a slow nod of respect, the kind that said, "We saw you, we heard you." She nodded back without speaking because her throat was too tight with everything she'd held in for years. That night she sat in her apartment surrounded by silence, the kind that pressed against her chest, the kind that followed loss. Yet somewhere underneath it was a hum, faint and insistent, like the memory of the chant still echoing through her bones. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from workers in Texas, Ohio, California, all saying they'd walked too. Each story was a spark in the dark web of American labor. Someone on Twitter had called her the girl who stopped the line. By morning the hashtag was trending. Reporters camped outside Packrite headquarters. The CEO issued another polished statement promising a renewed commitment to safety and dignity. Monique watched the clip on her phone, his perfect suit, his calm, rehearsed smile, and whispered, "Dignity doesn't come from press releases." Days turned into weeks. She couldn't find new work. Every application led to polite rejection or no reply at all. She'd been blacklisted quietly by a system that feared her courage. Rent piled up. She sold her car. Lena brought groceries once a week. Jamal dropped by to fix her leaky faucet. Their friendship was now deeper, welded by what they'd endured together. One afternoon, she was invited to speak at a local college forum on the modern workforce. She almost said no. Fear whispered that she was no speaker, just a tired woman with calloused hands. But Lena said, "You've already spoken louder than half the world." So she went. In the small auditorium, rows of students and activists waited, cameras rolling. She stood behind the podium, clutching her crumpled notes, and said softly, "I used to think silence was survival, that if I just kept my head down I could outwork injustice. But silence is what the system counts on. It's the cheapest labor they can buy." The crowd went still, leaning forward. "The day we stopped the line wasn't just about boxes and quotas," she continued. "It was about worth, about remembering that our lives mean more than the things we pack for other people." When she finished, they rose to their feet, applause swelling like ocean waves. Afterward, a young reporter approached. "People are calling you the voice of the movement," she said. Monique smiled faintly. "I'm not a voice. I'm an echo. The real voice belongs to everyone still inside those walls." The interview aired that night. Within days, more warehouses began to organize. Petitions circulated. Small strikes broke out from Seattle to Miami. Monique watched from her couch, part pride, part ache, because every victory reminded her of what she'd lost: the stability, the simplicity, the anonymity. Anonymous hate messages arrived too, accusing her of ruining jobs, of being ungrateful. She deleted them quietly, but sometimes they lingered in her mind during long nights when the wind rattled her windows and she wondered if courage was worth loneliness. One winter morning, she received a letter, thick envelope, official seal, from the Department of Labor. It read, "We are opening an investigation into Packrite logistics following multiple worker complaints and footage provided by employee advocates." Monique sat down slowly, the paper trembling in her hands, tears stinging her eyes. "It's starting," she whispered. Months passed. She took small speaking jobs, traveled to meet workers in other cities, slept on couches, shared stories of exhaustion and resilience. Each place felt familiar. The same gray walls, the same fluorescent hum, the same invisible fatigue. She told them all, "They can replace your name on the schedule, but they can't replace your humanity." The movement grew, not fast, not easy, but steady. People formed safety committees, demanded fair pay, refused silence. Corporate media tried to paint her as radical. Politicians called her the face of a new labor awakening. She laughed at that in private. She didn't feel like a face, just a heartbeat trying not to fade. Then came the day the Department of Labor fined Packwright millions for violations, unsafe conditions, falsified reports, excessive quotas, and news anchors said it was historic. The morning after, Monique returned to South Chicago to see the warehouse again. The building looked smaller than she remembered, stripped of its intimidation. A new banner hung at the gate. Now hiring, respect, fair pay, safe conditions. Workers, she didn't know, waved as she passed. One young man said, "We still keep a picture of you inside from that day." She smiled, eyes wet. "Keep working," she said, "but never stop being human." That night, she met Jamal and Lena at the same diner where they'd once planned their first steps. "Can you believe this?" Jamal asked, sliding his phone across the table. A video showed workers in another company striking in solidarity, holding signs that read echoes from the warehouse. Monique stared at it, shaking her head. "I just wanted them to listen," she said. "Now the whole country's talking." "You started something bigger than all of us," Lena said softly, "even if it cost you." Monique looked out the window where snow had begun to fall, soft and relentless. "Yeah," she whispered. "It cost me." When they parted ways, she walked alone toward the bus stop, the streetlights haloing the falling flakes, the city humming low around her. On the bench sat an old man in a work jacket, his hands trembling as he lit a cigarette. He glanced at her. "You that lady from TV? The warehouse one?" She nodded. "You made my granddaughter quit her job last month," he said. "Said she's going to finish school instead." He smiled, toothless but proud. "She's happier now." Monique's eyes burned. "That's good," she said quietly. "That's real good." The bus arrived, brakes sighing like weary lungs. She climbed aboard, sat by the window, watched the warehouse lights fade into distance. On her phone, a notification blinked. "Breaking news. Federal lawmakers introduce Worker Protection Act inspired by recent warehouse movements." Her breath caught. She leaned her head against the glass, listening to the city move beneath her. Engines, footsteps, laughter, the same sounds that had always filled her nights, but now they felt different, lighter somehow. She thought of the chant, the voices that once shook steel walls, and she smiled through her tears. "We're not machines. We are not replaceable." The bus turned onto the main road, headlights slicing through falling snow. She closed her eyes, hearing the echo of her own heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of 1,000 unseen workers across the country, each one lifting, packing, standing, hoping. And somewhere deep in that rhythm was her voice, quiet but unbroken, whispering to the future. "Don't let them silence you. Don't forget what we started." The city stretched out ahead, vast and humming, and Monique Daniels, once just another name on a clock and sheet, now carried the sound of a revolution in her chest. Not loud, not easy, but alive. Thanks for watching.